it is very interesting, at least for those of us who kind of like the inside stories on the Cavaliers, how Victor Oladipo was the guy who helped beat the Cavaliers in Game 1, because there is some real history with Victor Oladipo and the Cavs. The first part is this. In the 2013 draft, now again, that's 2013, Chris Grant, still the general manager, LeBron-James is a year away from coming to Cleveland. The Cavs are terrible. They got the #1 pick in the draft. They won the lottery in 2013. Chris Grant sitting there trying to figure out, who should I draft? Dan Gilbert, the owner, who does have his opinions on basketball players, told Chris Grant, and Chris Grant told me this story, so, you know, he liked Victor Oladipo from Indiana. Chris Grant said our problem was, he goes, we kind of liked Oladipo also, but they had Dion Waiters, there's a name from the past, and Kyrie Irving in the backcourt. Oladipo, a 6'4" guard, they figured you bring him in there with those two guys. At that point, Kyrie Irving and Dion Waiters were struggling to play with each other, and they figured another guard, it would just mess things up. So they didn't draft Oladipo, but who they took turned out to be one of the worst #1 picks in the NBA draft in all of history. A name that should be forgotten except when you do bad draft stories, Anthony Bennett from UNLV. And so what happened there was they took Bennett, who was a total flop. Oladipo went to Orlando, where he played reasonably well, averaged like 14 points for a couple of years, but wasn't the star. By the way, he was the #2 pick, Oladipo. Then he was traded to Oklahoma City last year, where he was on the same court with Russell Westbrook. They call it high usage in analytics. Those of us who played a lot of playground ball, whatever, call it ball hogging. In other words, Russell Westbrook has the ball a lot in the backcourt. Oladipo didn't get it that much. So he really didn't look good. Again, like averaging 15 points, that kind of thing. Now, we fast forward a couple years. It's the summer of 2017. This is the summer Kyrie Irving demands a trade. But even before that, this is all before Kyrie demanded his trade, the Cavs are trying to make a trade with Indiana for Paul George. At one point, they were talking about Kyrie Irving for Paul George. In fact, David Griffin was the general manager then. Griffin was trying to offer Kevin Love in a three-way deal for Paul George, because his idea, he didn't know at that point that Irving wanted out, was to get Paul George, Kyrie Irving, and LeBron James together on a team to go after Golden State. That stuff fell apart. Then the next move was to try and do this longer deal with Kevin Love. Indiana turned it down. Instead, what happened was the Pacers traded Paul George to Oklahoma City for Victor Oladipo and Sabonis. Sabonis is a big center. And everybody said, boy, that was a bad trade. In fact, Dan Gilbert, like the last press conference he about had with the Cavs, he was talking about Kobe Alton becoming the general manager, and in passing he said, Indiana made a bad trade. They would have gotten more had they made our trade, you know, meaning Kevin Love. Well, Oladipo was a very nice guy or whatever, didn't harp on this. But he was asked about it after Game 1, and he said, you know, I already have a lot of fire in me, but you could say it added fuel to the fire. But Oladipo goes to Indiana. He hooks up with one of my favorite NBA coaches, Nate McMillan. Nate McMillan starts telling Oladipo, you are going to be our #1 option. We're going to run plays through you, and you could average over 20 points for us. Which was the first time I think Oladipo was put in that situation where someone saw him as more than a good player, that you have a chance to be an all-star. He's only 25 years old, and this year it happened. The Pacers were built around Oladipo. He averaged 23 points a game, clearly, by the way, better than probably if they'd have gotten Kevin Love. Because, again, Indiana just seemed to come together around Victor Oladipo and Nate McMillan. So there you go. The Cavs are facing Cavs are facing Coach McMillan in the playoffs, and the Cavs are also facing Victor Oladipo. And they could have drafted him way back in 2013. They, you know, and then there was a trade in 2017. All this stuff going back and forth. You know, you go back and look at it, and I think this. Maybe back in that 2013 draft, if they'd just taken Oladipo and tried to trade Dion Waiters somewhere else, would the Cavs have been better off? I bet so.